Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I want to go through some of the unique items that I feel are somewhat overlooked in the Path of Exile community. And it's easy to do. There are so many unique items in Path of Exile, particularly some of the rarer ones, that it can be really hard to keep track of them all. So here's a list of some that you might have overlooked that I think are more powerful than people generally give them credit for. Now, most of these items, with a couple of exceptions, are quite rare. This means that solo self-found players will be lucky to see any of them. All of them, I believe, are powerful enough to merit more play than they currently see. Now, note that if you're playing in a trade league, because some of these are quite rare, they're only cheap because their demand is low. And if demand changes, these items can become very expensive indeed. As a bit of an example of this, and a good example of how wildly rare unique items can swing in price, if you have a look at the Chase unique item Skyforth, which has always been very rare, Skyforth was a 30 Chaos unique towards the end of the Metamorph League, and it's well over 1,000 Chaos at the moment in Delirium, and has been pushing the 2,000 Chaos barrier. All of this is because that one stat on it, 6% reduced mana reservation on an otherwise good set of boots, is more powerful in the current meta than it has been in the past. And so this is a way in which just having a very rare item can become very expensive if a lot of people want it at once, but when there's not as much demand, the price can really crater. So be warned, some of these might be much more expensive than when I'm recording the video. But let's start with something that is a time-worn unique, which means that it's not available through normal gameplay, except through sources of time-worn unique items. So this was one that was linked to one of the previous leagues, the Anarchy League, which is actually when I started playing Path of Exile several years ago. And this means that its primary source is from completing maps, and with a high enough awakening level. It can also drop from league content as well. Anyways, rare doesn't mean expensive. At the time of recording this video, Gifts from Above was a total 3 Chaos Orbs. Anyway, Gifts from Above is all about that damage and that critical strike chance. At very end game, critical strike chance is something that's pretty easy to come by. But when you're not yet at dealing with a super powerful character, having a 65% critical chance is golden. Now, you might not be able to get 65% chance. You're not going to divine this to get perfect 35 here, but you can certainly afford to bless it to get a perfect 30. So you're looking at somewhere between 60 and 65% global critical strike chance on a single ring. And in addition, you've got this second line that's important. 50% increased damage while on consecrated ground. And there's this trigger level 10 consecrate when you deal a critical strike. What level 10 consecrate does is it spawns consecrated ground at your feet. This lasts 7.5 seconds and has a cooldown of 5 seconds. So in theory, you've got 150% uptime, i.e. 100% uptime. But in practice, you do need to deal that first critical strike, and additionally, you need to be standing somewhat close to still. You can't always stay alive whilst dealing with mechanics in a fight and standing mostly still, so you're not going to have 100% uptime in practice, but you'll have it up a lot of the time, especially against bosses. 50% increased damage is nothing to sneeze at. You can definitely do better with a true endgame Opal Ring, which might also offer life and resist too, but early on, this is a really powerful ring. The item rarity stat is all upside, but it isn't much of an upside. Increased item rarity is a pretty bad stat in Path of Exile, so you can pretty much ignore it, but this is an item that's good without it, doesn't get much better by having it. Second up is one of the most commonly used items in the game, and I still think it is underrated. Atziri's Promise. This is the second most commonly used unique item amongst all players at very high level, level 96 and higher. The only thing that's used by more players is the Watcher's Eye unique jewel. And Atziri's Promise is absolutely incredible. It's strong on its own, and it's absolutely brokenly powerful on builds that can exploit damage conversion. If your build deals damage with hits and is not incapable of dealing chaos damage, say for instance due to the Keystone Avatar of Fire or to items that grant it, you should seek this out as one of your first major upgrades upon hitting endgame. But because it's got a 50% drop rate and it drops from normal Atziri, the League economy as a whole swims in them, and also solo self-found players can get this. So really this is just a tip for newer players that weren't aware of how powerful this item is. It's just really incredible. Next up we have Sintrek. Sintrek is a pair of unique boots that are in hot demand on the first day of a league. So veteran players know about this. This is a powerhouse item early on in a league and tends to be worth an Exalted Orb in trade for the first sort of 36 hours of a league or so. The reason for that is that this is just simply a really solid pair of introductory energy shield boots with move speed. Now it's only suited for builds that can manage the dexterity requirement. 117 dex is nothing to sneeze at, but a lot of builds need that for their skill gems anyway. Your reward for doing so is up to 180 energy shield at 20 quality, potentially up to 192 if you were to quality this up to 28 via using the betrayal benches. And whilst this is a set of boots that you don't want to be wearing forever, they're just pure gold, perhaps from level 62 when you can equip them, through to level 85 or so. After that point, you probably want to try and get something better. Realistically, you're going to want boots that have got 35% move speed instead of 30%. You're going to want boots that have got some resistances on them on most builds, but Sintrek is really good until you're at that point. Later in a league, when you can pick them up for 10 chaos or less, you can even corruption hunt with them and look for ones that have got 170 energy shield or more on them and hit them with Val Orbs, chasing one of 8 to 10% additional move speed, or 4 to 6% global energy shield, or some other niche options. Endurance charges are incredible, and one of the corruptions you can get is +1 maximum endurance charge. This is only valuable to you if you've got the cluster jewel node that grants heaps of endurance charges when you take a hit, but it is a very powerful option as well. So if you've got that cluster jewel in your build somewhere else, or maybe you're using a megalomaniac gem that grants it, then in that situation, Sintrek with Corrupted to get +1 maximum endurance charges is a really good option. Fourth up, and one of the last of the uncommon unique items, so the ones that are more accessible in solo self-found, is the Searing Touch. Now, the Searing Touch is simply a fireball, or sometimes other builds as well, but I think of it as a fireball staff because I use this a lot when I was playing a fireball build in the Blight League. And this is starter gear that's a couple of chaos, but is better than rares under 10 exalts. And that's what the Searing Touch is. +2 to the level of all fire spell skill gems is a huge damage boost to spells like Fireball. And then you've got the increased fire damage and increased cast speed and fire damage over time multiplier. Every stat on this is pure gold to a Fireball character. And whilst you can get better with actually godly items, this is going to be the best thing you get for a very long time. There is no shame at all in still using the Searing Touch as your weapon on a level 95 character. In fact, that's exactly what I was doing in the Blight League. My character from the Blight League never found anything better than the Searing Touch despite reaching level 95 with them and doing all 40 challenges. Next up is Crown of the Inward Eye. Now, this is something that's reasonably common and is a boss drop. Believed to have a 30% drop rate from Cyrus, this is somewhat of a waste product produced when players seek the actual chase items from that fight. So people are chasing Awakener's Orbs, Awaken Support Gems, and the Saviour, the unique sword, and they wind up getting a lot of Crown of the Inward's Eyes. So many of them, in fact, that they just have nothing really to do with them. Of course, you can always wear them. Now, I made a whole video on this item last league, but it's a pure power item that is only cheap because it's so common. The Transfigurations grant an attack character bonus damage equal to 30% of the sum of all percentage life that they've got on their character and percentage mana that they've got on their character. This can be percentage life and percentage mana that they've got from items, such as this explicit mod, but also from their passive tree. In practice, in my experience, you typically want 200% increased life on an endgame character. And so that's going to provide you 60% increased attack damage. You'll probably also pick up a bit of percentage mana on the tree. You're not really going for this, but some of the better life nodes have mana included in them. And so you may well end up with 50% increased mana on the tree as well. If that's the case, you're looking at, and then you've got your 21% from Crown of the Inward Eye, you're looking at getting something like 87% increased damage from this helmet as well. That's a really powerful bonus to your character's damage that comes on an item that's good enough to wear just based on its own on its own defensive stats. So the other option for this is a spellcaster build. Now with spellcasters, you don't get a bonus to damage from life, but you do get a bonus to damage from energy shield, and that's applied to spell damage. So if you're playing a build that has 200% increased energy shield on the tree and 100% increased mana on the tree, and also has 21% to both from Crown of the Inward Eye, then suddenly you're looking at getting 100% increased spell damage on this one helmet. Needless to say, for any energy shield based spellcaster or a life based attack build, this is an extraordinarily good helmet. The other thing is that because it's such a versatile helmet, it's a very popular choice to enchant. And I did a quick search on the ones that other players have got listed for trades, and you can realistically expect to find your perfect enchant on this item, albeit at a price. There were 3,800 Crowns of the Inward Eye available for sale in the Delirium Softcore Trade Enabled League. 3,800 of them for sale that had enchants on them. There were 8,000 of them if you include offline listings. So that's where someone's got it sitting in their premium tab, but they're currently not playing the game. Maybe they're off working. Maybe, who knows, maybe they've got a life somewhere else outside of the game, like some people claim that you can have. Whatever the case, there's 8,000 of them available for sale, 3,800 from players that are currently online, and that number's only going to grow over the league. So for that reason, actually, because there's so many of them available, it's even plausible to aspire towards, especially if your character's quite wealthy, to aspire towards getting multiple of the enchant that you want on this item, and then corrupting them to try and chase some of those really juicy helmet corruptions that are available. So yeah, Crown of the Inward Eye, really powerful item, really, really, really powerful item that is already being used a fair amount, but probably should be being used more than it is. Next up, I want to talk about the Pandemonious, which is which I feel is underrated. It's filthy to list here because most people that have played the game for a while know that this is a genuine chase item. It's one of the best unique items from the Breach League. It's something that a lot of people put into builds. However, I still feel that it is underrated. It provides explosive damage. 24% elemental penetration and 36% cold damage when you quality this up. That alone makes it compelling to use. But then add in the strong chill and the blind, and you're looking at an item that offers a lot defensively as well. Despite having no life and no energy shield, and only a marginal amount of resist on it, I still feel that this is a really powerful defensive item because of those mods. Now, people tend to think of Custom Critical Strike Ice Nova Assassin as a build that is a Cosprey's Malice build. However, Cosprey's is a power item that's easily substituted. I feel fundamentally that this build is a Pandemonious build. The build exists because the Pandemonious is such a powerful item. If your build is dealing cold damage with hits, and you have the in-league wealth to acquire Pandemonious, which is a couple hundred Chaos Orbs in a trade league that's matured, and a lot more expensive in an early on in a league. But if you've got those two factors met, you're playing cold damage with hits, and you've got the wealth to acquire this item, then you really need a compelling item not to use it. This is best in slot for so many builds, and just such an absolute powerhouse item that I feel that even though it's rated pretty highly, it's still underrated. Now we go from something that everyone knows about to an item that's really forgotten. And actually, I'd forgotten that this item existed too until someone pointed it out on YouTube. And this is a Fire Spellcaster Staff. Quite a bit better than Searing Touch for many builds, but I do want to add a very important warning. This item can and will get you killed on physical reflect maps. The reason for that is this This, what I actually think is a drawback, this grants level 15 Vengeance skill. Vengeance is a counterattack. When you are hit, Vengeance will go off and it will hit all enemies close to you for a lot of damage. This is based upon the damage of the weapon. Now, I believe that this is a spellcaster staff, first and foremost. It does incidentally have some ability to attack, but primarily, and for that matter, it has a lot of added fire damage on it when it does attack. But I do feel that the fact that this Vengeance goes off is a drawback because it will deal physical and fire damage to enemies that are near you. It will hit all the enemies near you, and this can be quite nasty on physical reflect maps. However, with that said, this simply has a lot of fire damage to spells, a hell of a lot of fire damage to spells, and conditional fire penetration as well, which will come up a fair amount, given that this can have as much as 34% chance to block attack damage, and then once you block an attack, you're getting your 15% fire penetration for the next period of time, the next 4 seconds. Now, this item is tier 1 rarity. It's very cheap at the moment, but it is one popular build away from being expensive. And I do want to give that as a little bit of a warning. Next up we have Voidforge. Voidforge is Starforge's unwanted twin. This only drops from the Uber Elder encounter, so it can be pretty rare. It deals incredible damage, but is hard to scale. It probably has the highest damage potential of any weapon in the game, but it's held back a bit by how hard the damage is to scale. The way that this works, so firstly it has increased physical damage, and this scales well with quality, and then it's got your attack speed and life, which of course life is good on a two-handed weapon. Your elemental damage can shock is the first line of note. That's a mirror to Starforge's your physical damage can shock. But then you've got the killer line, the thing that makes the whole weapon work. Gain 300% of weapon physical damage as extra damage of a random element. So 1/3 of the time this is going to give you 300% damage as added as cold, 1/3 it'll be lightning, 1/3 it will be fire. In addition to that, you have the, as I say, your elemental damage can shock, and you got a little bit of area of effect for attacks. However, you cannot deal non-elemental damage. So the base physical damage that you've been built, that you had a fair bit of on the item, that doesn't actually get applied to enemies. Instead, you only get this elemental damage. And likewise, you can't deal chaos damage, which is more of a big deal than this might seem, because one of the things that an item like this sort of feels like it wants to do is be used in conjunction with Atziri's Promise. Atziri's Promise would add a lot of chaos damage to Voidforge, however, Voidforge then comes along and says, all that added chaos damage, yeah, how about no? All that said, Voidforge is still really good in conjunction with sources of flat physical damage. Steel Rings, the physical damage added by the Cyclone skill gem, and Murderous Eye Jewels that add flat physical damage. It's hard to scale, and it's Buildmaker's puzzle waiting to be solved. Payoff for doing so is utterly explosive damage. The popular Twitch streamer Mathel made a build around this several leagues ago, and in doing so caused Voidforge to be one of the most expensive uniques in the game for a period of time. And sometimes he does play around with it. I think it's one of his pet items. But as something that can that can be used on a lot of different builds, it is a great little puzzle to try and experiment with. It's actually been popular on Elementalists in the past. And Mathel's last build that I remember seeing him playing around with was an Elementalist that was using Sweep. However, that was before Cyclone was buffed. With Cyclone basically obsoleting all other melee skills at the moment, I feel that if you're going to play around with this, you should probably do it on an Elementalist that runs all 3 of the main heralds, and that then scales up damage that way. So you've got all 3 of the main heralds, so Ash, Thunder, and Ice, which will then grant penetration for those 3 elements from the Elementalist Ascendancy, and then uses all sorts of jewels that add additional physical damage. That's the way I'd build around it at the moment, but I'd be using Cyclone. I wouldn't be using Sweep. As fun as Sweep seems to be, Cyclone just obsoletes everything else. Next up we have Zerfi's Heart. This is the fixed headhunter in a lot of ways. This was one of the rarest unique items the game has ever seen, and in fact, the most expensive unique item I have ever seen existing in a temporary league. And that was in the Incursion League when this item was staggeringly rare and hit a price. This may seem unbelievable, but this was being traded for 5 Mirrors of Kalandra. However, a divination card was added for it, the Life Thief, which, whilst it's a pretty damn rare divination card, people are finding this in Simulacrum, finding it in stack decks, and all sorts of places like that. Not many people are getting many of them, but across the economy as a whole, enough of them exist that Xerfi's Heart is affordable. I just purchased one before. I didn't purchase the item directly. I picked up all the divination cards for it. I believe I paid 110 Chaos Orbs for my Xerfi's Heart, and that was by buying the divination cards for anywhere from 17 to 20 Chaos Orbs, depending on who I was buying them from and how generous they were feeling. So, what does this item do? Well, firstly, it's got serious drawbacks. No life. No life is bad on an amulet, obviously. No resist. Also bad on an amulet. No capacity to be a shaper item for Eternity Shroud, which is something that I immediately look at when I see added chaos damage and your chaos damage can ignite, chill, and shock. I immediately think, oh, how do I do a lot of chaos damage? I do it with Eternity Shroud. Oh no, that's not allowed. But it also has the drawback that your items and gems have 50% increased attribute requirements. In practice, this tends to mean that you need to waste maybe 4 passive points on nodes that give 30 dexterity or 30 strength or 30 int, depending on your build. So there's a high opportunity cost to this item. However, the power is undeniable, and it only got better when it received a huge buff in 3.10. So Soul Eater is the heart of this item. No pun intended. Gain Soul Eater for 20 seconds when you use a Vaal skill. Legacy versions of this, so versions from before the 3.10 expansion hit, were 10 seconds, and even at 10 seconds the item was good. What Soul Eater does is it grants you 5% attack speed, 5% cast speed, and 1% character size per stack. Now, character size is a bit of a joke, but it does feel cool. What matters though is attack speed and cast speed. Each enemy that you kill grants 1 stack, and this can just stack and 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 stack. The highest that I've had this, when I had the 10-second version of it that I was using in the Legion League, I was able to get that over 200 a few times, and that was in the Delve Mines, but it can get much higher than that. Additionally, 20 seconds is the base duration of this effect. However, you can extend that via various shenanigans. The most significant one that players use is cursing themselves with the Temporal Chains curse through various means, and that can cause you to blow out the duration from far beyond 20 seconds. One important interaction is that Vaal skills will not gain souls while you have Soul Eater active. This is unfortunate. This is a drawback to the item, but it's a very manageable one. One way of dealing with this is through using a Vaal skill that you just use unlinked, and that is one of the skills that costs very few Vaal souls to use, and that can be used multiple times. So the ones that come to mind are Vaal Power Siphon, Vaal Spectral Throw, and Vaal Ground Slam. Vaal Ground Slam is the weakest choice of these 3, but it has one real bonus, and that is that it's actually kind of okay as a 4-link skill. Whereas Vaal Power Siphon and Vaal Spectral Throw, you're using them almost solely to set off the Xerfi's Heart. Now, when you're using this, in fast mapping you can easily acquire 100 souls, 200 souls or more. If you get 100 souls, that's 500% increased attack speed and cast speed. You will be zipping around like crazy with almost any movement skill, and you'll be attacking so fast that it'll just be absolutely incredible to see. In Delves, as I say, I've hit the hundreds and hundreds, and it's possible to get 500 or more. Now, I do want to add a warning, and that is that this item is legitimately very, 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 very rare. If you're in solo self-found, you should expect to never, ever, ever see this item. If you're in a trade-enabled league, you will be able to pick it up, but whilst I've been able to get one for a little over 100 chaos, you might not be able to get it at that price. The next one that I want to point out is Shadow Stitch. Now, with Shadow Stitch, rather than pulling up the Path of Exile wiki page, I've picked up examples of ones that are available for trade because it's easier to follow what's going on with this item. Firstly, Shadow Stitch is always a 6-linked item. Secondly, Shadow Stitch has 2 Val implicits always on it. Thirdly, it has a couple of interesting little mechanics. Firstly, it penalizes your resist for each corrupted item you've got equipped. It's always corrupted itself, so you're going to have at least one. But the way that this item is set up, you're probably going to want to be equipping 8, 9, or 10 or more corrupted items. If ever you want to corrupt an item without risking destroying it, you can do this with beast crafting. If you've got a shield, an armor piece, anything that accepts quality, so weapons as well, you can take it to Einhar's Beast Altar and use, I believe it's a Krakic Vessel is the name of the beast in question, but I would have to check that. And it will corrupt the item, and it will not have any potential of re-randomizing it into an item with undesirable stats. It will keep all the stats, and it will raise its quality to 30% and corrupt the item. That's quite useful for Shadow Stitch, but in terms of the effects on this, 3 to 5% regaining that. Recover 3 to 5% of life and energy shield on kill. There's a huge amount of armor, evasion, and energy shield, a small amount to all attributes, and then you've got this life percent buff. Now, and also energy shield percent buff. We were mentioning before an item called Crown of the Inward Eye. There's a lot of synergy here. If you're using 10 corrupted items, then suddenly this is going to provide you with either 60% increased maximum life on your chest piece, which then Crown of the Inward Eye will turn into 18% increased damage for attacks, or 80% increased global energy shield, which will then turn into 24% increased spell damage. So Shadow Stitch is really, really good. It has a couple of drawbacks though. It's always corrupted. And what this means is that it can be a pain in the ass and quite expensive to get the colors that you desire on it. Because it's got the same attribute requirements for strength, dexterity, and intelligence, there's basically no weighting. And so you'll find that you'll have an equal chance to get for the first socket to be red, green, or blue. The second socket is equal chance to be red, green, blue, etc., etc., etc. This means that Shadow Stitch is more appropriate if you're running a build that wants a balance in its sort of colors that it's going for. So if you want something that's, say, 3 green, 2 red, 1 blue, then this is going to be manageable. And actually, you can see here, this is 3 green, 2 red, 1 blue. On the flip side, if you wanted something that was 4, 2, 0, that's going to be a lot rarer. The more difference in the numbers of each color that you want, the less likely it is to roll. Additionally, you can only change the colors on a corrupted item by using the crafting bench, and that gets expensive because you'll need to supply Val orbs in equal quantity to the amount of chromatics that you're using. So Shadow Stitch can be expensive to get the right colors on, and ultimately, one of the best ways to find a Shadow Stitch is simply to look in the trade league for ones that other players have come across. And you'll see they sort of vary in price. Some of them, well, we've got some truly extraordinary one here that someone's asking 80 exalts for. I'm not sure if they'll get it, but I don't think it's an unreasonable price. And then you've got ones that are considerably cheaper at the top. So where does Shadow Stitch come from? Shadow Stitch is solo self-found attainable within limits. This is acquired only by feeding a sacrificial garb to Elva's Corruption Altar. Even then, you've only got a 25% chance. Sacrificial garbs are an item base that only Atziri can drop. This can drop as an item level 72 version from normal Atziri in the Apex of Sacrifice, an item level 82 version in the Alluring Abyss, and potentially higher or lower from Atziri in the Temple of Atsuadal. Wherever you fight her though, she seems to drop a sacrificial garb quite a lot. You'll then need to take that into the Temple of Atsuadal and use Elva's Double Corruption Altar on it. When you do that, you'll have a 1 in 4 chance of the item being converted into Shadow Stitch. I believe that the item that you put on the altar needs to have been scoured as well. It does not need to be 6-linked. You should not 6-link your sacrificial garb before you do this. And then, yeah, it can just be put on as an unlinked item. It will be 6-linked if it ends up as Shadow Stitch. So it's a good source of a 6-link item, as well as being a particularly, a potentially very powerful unique. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there at this point. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I hope you have a good one. And thanks to everyone that chipped in with suggestions for items that should be included here. So Ty Rodney was the person that brought up Crown of the Inward Eye first, although it's one that I'd certainly had already had in mind. Then there's a few suggestions I didn't use. Sliver Tongue, which is a really good item. Wreath of Freesia, Perfect Form, Sepen Eared, Soul Rest, Lights of Lunaris, Gifts from Above, which I did end up using, and thank you Timu King because I'd forgotten about that. Dendrobate, which is really good, and I didn't get around to Kintsugi from Chris, Chris Chang, which is a really good point. Voidforge, thanks Poho for reminding me that it exists because I'd forgotten. And then there's Ichimonji, which I didn't mention. Lots and lots and lots of options. Thanks Isaac Wakefield for reminding me Martyr of Innocence exists. And then there's more as well. Oxium, Jothaxify was brought up, Zerfi's Heart, although that was one that was on my radar to do. And Just Incredible there with Searing Touch. So thanks to everyone that made suggestions. And the last point that I want to leave with is this really insightful comment from Renora Zorro here, which is, the real question is price versus reward. And this goes for any unique item that's genuinely rare that will be an upgrade for your build. If I can make a rare that has twice as much damage but costs 10 times as much, is it worth it? I think Don the Crown does a good job explaining this. Don the Crown's got a great YouTube channel, it's worth checking out. You can buy a Saviour and a Foil for 50 Exalts and gain 20% more power, or you can buy a -9 Resist Helm and gain 9% more power for 5 Exalts. And I think this is the thing no one really talks about. And yeah, I really agree with that. Opportunity cost on upgrades. It is better to get the low-hanging fruit first. And so, for instance, if you're thinking of going for let's say that you're thinking of going for a +3 to fire skills staff that also has good other mods. That's your ultimate endgame plan. Maybe it's just better to make do with the Searing Touch for almost the entire league and invest that currency in other upgrades. So you should always think about it's a big balancing game, but I'm going to leave it there. Comments and questions below. Otherwise, I hope you have a good one.